Tonight, a moment that could redefine the future of global security just unfolded. Iran, already in the midst of one of the most intense geopolitical confrontations of the 21st century, has inaugurated a new supreme leader. In a world on edge, his very first message was directed squarely at the United States. The words he chose and the way he chose to deliver them are being analyzed with near military precision in capitals from Washington to Tel Aviv to Brussels. So, what did he actually say? Was this message a warning, a declaration, or something far more calculated? Tonight, we're going to unpack exactly what was said, why it matters, and how the U.S. leadership is preparing to respond. This isn't abstract geopolitics. This is a turning point, a moment that could shift relations between two powerful nations and reshape the balance of influence across the Middle East and beyond. Stay with me as we break down every aspect of it, the context, the implications, and what could come next. The Middle East has been volatile for years, but in early March this year, tensions exploded in a way few expected. After decades of rivalry and mounting pressure over Iran's nuclear program and regional influence, a decisive military strike by the United States and Israel targeted the longtime supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In that strike, the leader who had dominated Iranian politics for nearly 4 decades was killed, setting off a seismic shift in Iranian leadership and international relations. Within days, Iran's Assembly of Experts met for an emergency session, a constitutional body empowered to choose the nation's supreme leader. In a move that surprised analysts and world leaders alike, they unanimously appointed Mojtaba Khamenei, the second son of the late leader, to fill the position. This was not just a familial succession, it was a political signal. The system remains intact, the memory of past leadership endures, and the core power structures in Tehran remain consolidated. Unlike many previous holders of this role, Mojtaba's rise was not preceded by long public visibility or decades of official bureaucratic leadership. Instead, he was known as an influential insider, someone who moved largely in the shadows, connected deeply with Iran's security apparatus and the powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. This raised alarms in international intelligence circles, with many experts warning that a leader with deep ties to military structures and relatively less public exposure could pursue a more hardline strategy than his predecessor. In the volatile climate of an active conflict, Iran's choice of new leadership and the rapidity with which it occurred has added a new layer of uncertainty to an already fragile situation. And when the first words from this new leader are directed at the United States, the world pays attention. To understand why this first message matters so much, we have to look at who Mojtaba Khamenei is and why his appointment is significant. Unlike his father, Mojtaba did not rise through the traditional clerical hierarchy. He is not widely recognized as a religious authority in Iran's theological community in the same way that many prior leaders have been. Instead, his influence was cultivated within Iran's powerful security networks, particularly the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, an institution responsible for internal security, missile development, and strategic operations across the Middle East. This distinction matters. While Iran's political system is built on religious authority, it is also deeply interwoven with military power. Mojtaba's ascension suggests that, in a time of war and crisis, Iran's security apparatus may hold greater sway, and that the nation's new leader may lean more heavily on strategic, militarized decision-making rather than purely ideological guidance. International analysts have described this shift as more than symbolic. They argue that it reflects a potential reorientation of Iran's strategic posture, emphasizing resilience, deterrence, and calculated defiance in the face of foreign pressure. For countries watching from afar, this is all but certain to influence how they interpret Mojtaba's first message to the United States. When Iran's new supreme leader delivered his first message addressed to the United States, it was brief but unmistakably firm. In a televised address carried on state media, Mojtaba conveyed a message that defended Iran's sovereignty and framed any external pressure as a threat to national dignity. While the broadcast did not go into granular detail about military plans or specific strategic actions, the tone, timing, and wording were enough to send a clear signal. Iran will not yield to coercion, and its leadership remains steadfast in its objectives. State media translations noted emphasis on resilience, unity, and defiance, a rhetorical posture designed to reassure domestic audiences and signal to foreign powers that Iran's political structure remains unified despite recent upheavals. Experts who have reviewed portions of the speech argue that the language, while carefully measured, was laden with strategic implications, reinforcing Iran's long-standing message that it views foreign military pressure as unacceptable and will pursue its national objectives regardless of external interference. This message did not merely reiterate old talking points, it reframed them under a new leadership at a moment of high tension. And that's what makes it significant. It's a calculated political communication sent to multiple audiences at once: Iran's own population, its regional allies and adversaries, and, most importantly, the United States. The United States reacted swiftly to Iran's first message, and the response was both measured and resolute. High-level officials in Washington emphasized that Iran's leadership change does not alter how the United States views its strategic commitments. The core message from U.S. officials was clear: America remains committed to protecting its interests, its allies, and regional stability, and any actions perceived as threats to those priorities will be taken seriously. President Trump, addressing the nation shortly after Mojtaba's speech, reiterated that the United States remains prepared to respond to any hostile action while still keeping diplomatic avenues open. He described the situation as a delicate balance, one where strength must be paired with caution, and where deterrence must be maintained without unnecessarily provoking further escalation. In addition to public remarks, senior officials in Washington and Pentagon leadership have been closely evaluating intelligence assessments, military readiness postures, and diplomatic channels to ensure that the United States is both vigilant and flexible in its approach. The underlying message remains unchanged. While the U.S. seeks peace and stability, it will not be passive in the face of aggressive acts that threaten American personnel, partners, or global security. Iran's message did not only reverberate in Washington, it rippled outward across the Middle East and beyond. Israel, Iran's most outspoken regional adversary, weighed in on the situation with strong language of its own. Officials in Jerusalem reiterated that any threats or messages perceived as hostile would be taken seriously and met with coordinated responses alongside U.S. partners. Gulf Arab states, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, have also been vocal. These nations are acutely aware of how shifts in Iran's leadership dynamics could affect regional security, economic stability, and energy markets. While some have echoed calls for restraint and diplomatic engagement, others have expressed deeper concern over potential escalation in cross-border tensions. In Iraq, Lebanon, and Syria, areas where Iranian influence has long played a role, reactions have been mixed, reflecting complex political realities on the ground. Some factions have viewed Mojtaba's message as a reinforcement of regional resistance, while others see it as a potential flashpoint that could draw neighboring countries into broader conflict. Across the Arabian Peninsula and North Africa, leaders are closely watching both Tehran's posturing and Washington's response, recognizing that developments in this crisis could shape alliances, security agreements, and even future diplomatic initiatives. Beyond the Middle East and the United States, world powers have weighed in with their own assessments. European nations, many of which have sought a diplomatic resolution to tensions with Iran, expressed concern about the potential for further escalation. Leaders in Brussels and Paris called for calm and urged renewed diplomatic engagement to prevent conflict. At the same time, other global actors have offered more ambiguous or even supportive reactions. Russia, while not directly endorsing Iran's message, emphasized the importance of restraint and dialogue, framing the situation as one requiring careful negotiation rather than confrontation. China, which has maintained strategic dialogue with Iran on trade and energy, called for stability, and reiterated its interest in peaceful solutions to international disputes. Both Beijing and Moscow stressed that regional security is best served through diplomatic channels and opposed actions that could heighten tensions between major powers. These global responses underscore a world watching closely, where every statement, public or private, is parsed for its strategic meaning. So, what exactly did Iran's first message to the United States signify? Experts across geopolitical, military, and diplomatic fields have offered interpretations, and while not uniform, several themes have emerged. Some analysts see the message as designed to signal continuity and resilience, a declaration that Iran's leadership remains united and steadfast despite the loss of its previous supreme leader. Others interpret it as a calculated diplomatic message intended to assert sovereignty while leaving room for future negotiation, carefully crafted to please domestic audiences and reassure allied factions without closing off channels for dialogue. Still, concerns persist among Western observers that the message reinforces an ideological posture that views foreign pressure as a threat to national identity, which could make future negotiations more difficult. The strategic environment analysts emphasize is not black and white. Iran's message can be read as both defiance and deterrence, a complex declaration that requires careful response from the United States and its partners. In the wake of this message, several potential outcomes remain on the table. The first possibility is that diplomatic engagement increases, with the United States and Iran exploring limited negotiations aimed at de escalating tensions, a path that would likely involve intermediaries and international organizations. A second scenario involves continued pressure and readiness on both sides, maintaining a tense but controlled standoff without direct conflict. This could mean heightened military alertness and strategic messaging, but no major escalation. A third, more concerning possibility is that misunderstandings or miscalculations, intentional or accidental, lead to limited military clashes. In a region already marked by volatility, even small confrontations can have cascading effects. Finally, there is the risk, rare but not impossible, that the situation spirals into a broader regional conflict, drawing in multiple nations and shifting the strategic landscape significantly. What comes next depends not only on Iranian calculations, but on how the United States balances strength, diplomacy, and engagement with allies. Tonight, the world awaits the next message, the next move, and the next decision from leaders on all sides. Iran's new supreme leader has spoken, and the United States has listened, but the conversation is far from over. What does this mean for American security? For the Middle East? For global stability? Only time will tell. We'll be watching every development as it unfolds, and we'll break it all down for you, here, with clarity and context that matters. Stay with us. Subscribe. Turn on notifications. Because in moments like these, every detail counts and the next chapter is still being written.